Even if you're coaching for free, you should not do so without a proper coaching contract in place. If you are charging for your coaching services, which you definitely should, then having a solid contract agreement with your clients is a must. In this video, I'm going to share with you the essential elements of a coaching contract. Hello friends and welcome to the channel. My name is Alisa and I help qualified or soon to be qualified coaches build successful coaching businesses. And it all starts with a solid coaching contract, which is a legally binding agreement that sets the terms and conditions of the coaching engagement you will have with each of your clients. There are a few elements that I believe a good coaching contract should include, so grab a drink and let's jump straight in. The first one is an introduction where you set the scene for the coaching agreement. You know what coaching is, but your clients might not. So in the introduction, you can help them understand what coaching is and what it is not. Depending on the type of coaching you do, it might be important to make it very clear from the beginning what clients can expect from working with you. When I did financial coaching for personal finances, I made it extremely clear in the first part of the contract that I will not offer people financial advice, and I gave examples of what that means. I also used this section to educate clients on the differences between financial coaching and financial advice. The second element of a good coaching agreement is one that clearly sets out the responsibilities of each party. In other words, what can the client expect of you as the coach and what are they expected to do? Things like being open and honest, committed, taking responsibility for their own actions and results, but also practical things like showing up on time and prepared, doing the work they have agreed to do in between sessions, and so on. I usually take some time at the beginning of the coaching engagement in the very first session to also obtain a verbal agreement for all these expectations. The next important thing a coaching contract should mention is around confidentiality and data protection. What is said in the coaching sessions remains confidential, but there are a few circumstances in which the coach might be obligated to disclose information to a third party. Examples include when the client is doing something illegal, when they are a danger to themselves or others, etc. With regards to data protection, you should make it clear to the client how you are storing the information you have about them, what methods of communication and delivery you will use, and what are the data protection implications associated with that. So familiarize yourself with GDPR rules and other relevant data protection legislation for your country and make sure that you abide by those regulations. The next element is very important, especially if you are self-employed, and that is a limited liability clause, which does exactly what the name suggests. It limits your liability as the coach should something go wrong and the client decides to take you to court. Even if you coach through a limited company, this clause is an important one and every coaching contract should include it. The International Coaching Federation has a very good example of such a clause which you can adapt and use in your own contract. I will put it on the screen now to give you an indication of what it looks like. ICF has an entire template for a coaching agreement and I will leave a link to it in the description box below. Nevertheless, even with this clause in the contract, you should not coach without proper insurance. This limited liability clause does not replace professional indemnity insurance, and you should never coach anyone if you are not insured. If you're getting value from the video so far, I would appreciate it if you gave it a big thumbs up and consider subscribing. It really helps to support the channel and I thank you in advance if you do. The next element of a good coaching contract is a detailed account of the fees payable and any payment terms you and the client have agreed on. How much does it cost to work with you and how is the client expected to pay? Is there a down payment followed by installments? Do you take payment in advance of each session or do you invoice clients afterwards and they have a week to pay you, for example? Are there any penalties for late payments? All of this needs to be included in the contract, otherwise you will not be able to enforce it. I personally take payment in advance for my one-to-one sessions and I make this very clear when I'm having a conversation with someone who wants to work with me. This is to avoid having to chase people for payments, and I suggest that you do the same and you put it in your contract so there is no room for misunderstanding. The next thing to include is a refund policy if you have one. Do you offer refunds, and what are the conditions for a refund? Unless you have a very thorough process you go through for refunds, this aspect of the contract doesn't have to be more than a couple of lines. If you don't offer refunds, be very clear about that too. Another important aspect to include is a rescheduling policy. How will you deal with clients who want to postpone sessions? How long in advance do they need to let you know? I have a policy of 24 hours notice for rescheduling. Any change with less than 24 hours notice means that a session will be charged in full unless it was a justifiable emergency. But it is at my discretion to waive the 24-hour rule on a case-by-case basis, and my contract allows me to do that. Similarly, you may wish to include a termination policy, stating what are the responsibilities of each party in case the contract is terminated. This usually includes a minimum notice period from either party and the client's agreement to pay for any coaching sessions that were delivered but not paid for. I also like to include a disclaimer in my contracts, especially around not offering financial advice and around the guarantees that I am or am not able to make with regards to the coaching engagement. I don't include this as a separate section, but rather I include parts of it in the introduction, the limited liability clause, and other sections of the contract. If your work is a bit more complicated, let's say that you combine coaching with therapy, for example, you might want to make the disclaimer a separate section of the contract and state that sometimes you will not act in your capacity as a coach, but with the client's permission, you might wear a different professional hat. Again, this disclaimer will largely depend on the type of work you do with clients and the particularities of your coaching arrangement. In addition to the coaching contract elements I mentioned so far, there are a few other things you might want to include as well. For example, practicalities about how you will conduct the sessions, online, offline, maybe a combination of both, how often you will have sessions, what else the client has access to in between sessions, things like accountability calls, for example. If you give your client feedback or are available to answer their calls and emails, etc. If there are any limits regarding these practicalities, like how many accountability calls they will have, how many times they can email you, and when they can expect you to respond, you could include that in the contract too. And this is to avoid clients abusing these extra features and calling you all day, every day, sending you emails at midnight and expecting an immediate response and so on. And of course, at the end of the contract, both parties must sign and date the document, acknowledging that they have read and understood it and that they agree to the terms and conditions laid out in the contract. Now that you have your contract in place, you can start working with people and use coaching to make an impact in their lives and yours. That's all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, you might want to check out these 2 videos as well. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Alisa, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.